"You don't belong here." Claire Donovan's words sliced through the hushed hum of the VIP lounge, the velvet chairs and polished mahogany surfaces suddenly feeling stifling and hostile. Jordan Blake paused at the threshold, his plain black shirt and dark jeans unassuming. Yet there was a quiet authority in the way he carried himself, shoulders back, eyes steady, observing every movement, every twitch of the staff around him. The receptionist's forced smile fading as she glanced at him sideways. A junior attendant fidgeting with her phone, curiosity glinting in her eyes. Other guests turning slightly in their seats, whispering under their breath. Jordan's gaze swept the room, calm and deliberate, noting the subtle microexpressions of judgment, skepticism, and entitlement that hung in the air. He moved slowly toward the seating area, each step measured, unhurried, unafraid. His presence like a quiet tide washing over the tension. Claire stepped forward, lips tight, eyes narrowing. "Sir, I need to see your membership verification." Her voice edged with condescension. Jordan lifted a hand gently, signaling that he had already anticipated this moment. He set his phone lightly on the console, eyes locked on hers, unblinking, unshaken, the hum of murmurs and discreet phone recordings rising as a few guests subtly raised devices, catching the unfolding scenario. The lounge, once a place of polished serenity, now charged with anticipation. Jordan's mind briefly drifted to the countless times in his career when appearances had been weaponized against him, subtle dismissals in boardrooms, casual assumptions in exclusive events, moments when silence and composure had been the only armor he possessed. And now, in this familiar tension, he wielded it like a shield and a sword simultaneously. Claire's hand hovered over the verification scanner, hesitating, sensing the calm that radiated from him. The room holding its breath, a subtle ripple of whispers passing between the observing guests, one of them nudging a friend and murmuring, "Is this guy serious? He's acting like he owns the place." Unaware that he almost literally did, Jordan reached a hand for the elegant leather-bound guest book, not to brandish power but to execute the first move of his quiet orchestration, his fingers brushing the page with deliberate care, eyes never leaving Claire, who began to falter. The practiced facade of authority cracking under the silent scrutiny of both the watching staff and the audience now attuned to the unfolding imbalance. Jordan's lips pressed in a line, voice unneeded, for the room could read his command in the way he held himself, the subtle tilt of his head, the poised restraint that contrasted sharply with Claire's rising agitation, murmurs growing into faint gasps as more guests realized the gravity of the moment. The junior attendant shifting forward, phone poised, capturing every microsecond of tension, and Jordan, fully aware of every gaze, every flicker of doubt, let the silence stretch, each heartbeat, elongating the suspense, the energy in the room thick, almost tactile, the velvet curtains, the low lighting, the glinting glass surfaces reflecting not just his image but the weight of anticipation, and in that quiet intensity, the foundation for the inevitable revelation was being set, the calm before the crescendo of authority that would leave the lounge transformed, Claire's voice faltering, guests leaning forward, cameras quietly recording, every eye fixed on the unassuming figure who carried the power of experience and ownership beneath a surface of deliberate restraint. Jordan Blake, silent, observing, preparing for the shift that was about to redefine the room and everyone in it. The tension in the lounge thickened as Claire Donovan straightened her blazer, stepping closer with a clipboard in hand, her eyes darting to the observing guests as though they could shield her from scrutiny. Jordan Blake remained perfectly still, the calm in his posture radiating a quiet command that seemed to slow the air around him, each guest instinctively leaning forward, some raising phones discreetly, capturing every subtle motion, the murmur of whispered conversations blending with the soft hum of the air conditioning, creating a backdrop of collective curiosity and mounting anticipation. Jordan's gaze swept across the room, noting the stifled gestures of staff and the hesitant glances of those seated nearby, his mind cataloging each reaction, each twitch, each flicker of judgment. He remembered earlier moments in his career, times when assumptions and appearances had been weaponized, when people had judged him on nothing but clothing or accent, experiences that had honed his patience, his ability to remain centered while others fumbled, Now those lessons were being applied in real time. The lounge itself seemed to pulse with the tension, the velvet upholstery, polished wood, and muted gold accents reflecting not only light, but the silent pressure that hung over every interaction. Claire's hand hovered uncertainly over her tablet, a microsecond of doubt. Passing in her expression, Jordan adjusted his stance subtly, a small shift that communicated confidence without confrontation. A junior attendant stepped slightly forward, phone poised to record, yet Jordan's calm presence radiated reassurance, the room becoming a stage, each person playing a role in the unspoken drama unfolding. Whispers grew louder as more guests tuned in, some leaning toward friends and quietly asking questions. Jordan's eyes flicked toward them briefly, acknowledging their silent curiosity. The calm strength in his demeanor seemed to suggest that he controlled not just the room but the tempo of the unfolding events. Claire's lips pressed together, the facade of authority she had relied upon for years beginning to waver under the weight of attentive eyes and Jordan's unwavering presence. He lifted a hand slowly, signaling subtly to his assistant without words, a quiet command that the room sensed even if the mechanics were invisible. The guests shifted, some straightening in their chairs, others exchanging glances that carried the realization that power in this lounge was far from what appearances suggested. Jordan inhaled, a measured pause allowing the suspense to ripple through the space. The soft click of heels against marble, the shuffle of papers, and the faint ping of a notification created a rhythm, punctuating the silent standoff. His eyes never left Claire's, a mirror reflecting composure against agitation. The room collectively held its breath, waiting for the inevitable movement, a pivot, a confirmation of authority, and in that perfect stillness, the audience sensed that the quietest person in the room carried the greatest power, every microexpression, every subtle reaction weaving together into a tableau that would soon cascade into the revelation that would change everything in the lounge, leaving the guests on the edge of their seats, hearts quickened, minds racing, all aware that a silent authority was preparing to rewrite the rules of the space in a way that no shouting, no gestures, no posturing could have achieved. And yet, the resolution, the dramatic shift, remained just beyond the current moment, a promise lingering, compelling everyone watching to lean closer and anticipate the transformation that Jordan Blake was poised to execute. Claire Donovan shifted her weight from one foot to the other, glancing nervously at the growing number of guests who had subtly turned their attention toward Jordan Blake, her voice attempting authority yet tinged with uncertainty as she said, "Sir, please present your credentials for verification." Jordan, without breaking his calm, slowly reached into his pocket and retrieved a slim leather wallet. Sliding his membership card across the polished counter with deliberate care, his eyes never leaving hers, the subtle smile on his lips conveying confidence without arrogance. A junior attendant stepped forward, phone in hand, capturing the moment while a few seated guests leaned closer, murmuring quietly, exchanging glances that reflected both curiosity and disbelief. Jordan's gaze swept the room, noting the subtle shift in energy, the soft inhalations of those realizing that composure could command attention more effectively than words. Claire's hand hovered over the tablet, hesitant, the quiet authority emanating from Jordan creating an invisible pressure that filled the space. He allowed the silence to stretch, each second drawing out the tension, his posture steady, shoulders back, chin slightly raised, commanding the room without a single raised voice. A faint ping from his phone signaled his assistant's readiness, the soft notification blending with the whispered murmurs, reinforcing that his quiet orchestration was already in motion. Jordan's thoughts briefly flicked to prior moments in his career when assumptions and bias had been used to underestimate him. And now those lessons crystallized into a poised strategy. The lounge itself seemed to hold its breath, the warm lighting reflecting off the mahogany surfaces, the gold accents catching faint glimmers. As if the environment itself acknowledged the impending shift, Claire swallowed, realizing that the familiar tactics of subtle dismissal and enforced hierarchy were ineffective against the calm determination before her. The guests' eyes widened incrementally, some discreetly recording, others simply observing, the growing awareness of his quiet influence rippling through the room. Jordan's hand returned to his side, his focus unbroken, each movement minimal yet charged with authority. A subtle nod toward the junior attendant signaled readiness without uttering a word, the tension now fully shared among all present, a chorus of soft gasps and shifting feet responding to the unspoken dynamics. Claire's attempt to assert dominance faltered further, the room increasingly aligned with the presence of someone who carried ownership not only in title but in measured command. Jordan's silent confidence acted like a magnet, drawing attention, shaping perception, and preparing the space for the revelation that would not require loud declarations, only the undeniable truth of presence, foresight, and control. And as the murmurs swelled and the room subtly leaned in, Jordan Blake remained the still center, an anchor of authority and precision, ready for the next move that would solidify the transformation of the lounge and the perception of everyone within it, the moment hanging delicately between anticipation and the inevitable shift in power. Claire Donovan's expression tightened, the subtle tremor in her hands betraying the confidence she had tried to project. Guests shifting slightly in their seats, leaning forward to catch every nuance of the unfolding scene. Jordan Blake remained perfectly poised, his posture calm and deliberate, a quiet tension radiating from him that made the room feel simultaneously smaller and charged with anticipation. The soft click of a pen on the counter echoed lightly, juxtaposed against the low hum of conversations now muted as everyone instinctively watched. Jordan's eyes scanned the observers, registering their curiosity and silent support, each head turning subtly, cameras poised, whispers passing like ripples in water, the air thick with the collective anticipation of what would happen next. Claire opened her mouth, started a sentence, and paused, the words hanging in the air, unresolved, as if the room itself held its breath. Jordan's hand moved subtly toward his phone, just enough to signal readiness without drawing attention, the faint ping of a notification barely audible, yet enough to carry a weight that resonated through the room. A junior attendant straightened, phone raised, capturing the poised calm of the moment while the other guests exchanged glances, the realization dawning slowly that the balance of authority was shifting, Jordan's quiet command palpable, his gaze unwavering, each microexpression a message, each measured breath a signal of control. Claire's attempt to assert dominance faltered further, her posture stiffening as the observer's attention and subtle whispers aligned with Jordan's presence. The velvet upholstery, polished wood, and brass accents reflected light in a way that accentuated the tension, the space feeling both luxurious and charged with imminent revelation. Jordan's thoughts briefly traced the path that had brought him here, experiences where patience, composure, and subtle authority had been tested over years, the lessons manifesting now as a still center in a room slowly tilting toward awareness and recognition. A faint murmur rose as a guest shifted in their chair, leaning closer, phone discreetly capturing the tableau, and Jordan acknowledged it with a slight nod, an almost imperceptible gesture that carried reassurance and further amplified his unspoken authority. Claire's lips parted, searching for the words to regain control, yet every second she hesitated, the subtle consensus of the room grew, the watching eyes, the poised devices, the quiet yet palpable anticipation weaving together into a single force that filled the lounge with energy. Jordan's calm became the focal point, every motion intentional, every glance measured, the space suspended in a moment that was already shifting, a prelude to the revelation that would soon redefine the dynamics of the room, the tension coiling like a spring ready to release, leaving the guests fully aware that something decisive was about to occur. And in that poised, silent command, the power he wielded without a word began to reshape not just the perception of authority, but the very flow of events in the VIP lounge, leaving a palpable anticipation that stretched across every seat, every observer, every hidden camera, the entire room collectively leaning forward into the quiet before the storm of revelation. The subtle shift in the lounge was undeniable, the guests leaning in ever so slightly as the tension became almost tangible. Claire Donovan fidgeting with the edge of the counter, her carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. Jordan Blake remained a study in poise, his calm presence commanding the space without a word, each gesture deliberate, each measured breath communicating control and anticipation. A faint tap of his finger against his phone sent a ripple through the room. The junior attendant instantly understanding the cue, fingers hovering over the recording device, capturing every nuanced reaction, murmurs among the guests spreading quietly like a current, curiosity and silent support intertwining. Jordan's gaze met theirs briefly, acknowledging the shared observation without breaking the stillness that defined him. The air seemed to thicken, the polished wood surfaces, brass accents, and soft lighting reflecting both the elegance of the space and the weight of expectation. Claire stepped closer, attempting to reclaim a semblance of authority, her voice slightly sharper now. Yet there was hesitation underlying each syllable. Jordan shifted slightly, just enough to signal readiness and focus without creating overt motion. The room held collectively, the audience in their seats, the subtle tension growing with each second. His mind tracing earlier experiences where appearances and assumptions had been wielded against him, lessons now applied with deliberate precision in the present moment. The whisper of papers, the soft scrape of chairs against the floor, and the faint hum of the ventilation system accentuated the charged stillness. The guests watching attentively, some raising their phones discreetly, others simply leaning forward, captivated by the silent authority Jordan exuded. Claire's lips pressed together, her gestures tightening as the quiet pressure of observation and awareness pressed upon her, the space itself seeming to align with the shift in power. Jordan's eyes methodically scanning the room, taking in the microexpressions, the subtle movements, the way the guests instinctively leaned toward observation, every microsecond building toward a subtle crescendo, a tableau of poised tension, anticipation mounting as the unseen mechanisms of his quiet orchestration unfolded, the soft click of a notification from his assistant signaling readiness, the room registering it almost subconsciously, the lounge vibrating with silent energy. Jordan remaining the immovable center, an anchor whose calm dominance reshaped the perception of authority within every observer present. Claire's attempt to dictate the scenario faltering under the combined weight of poised patience, attentive observation, and the gathering realization that the true control resided entirely with the figure before them. The soft whisper of conversation, the faint shuffling of devices, the attentive glances from corner to corner, all contributing to a sense that the space was poised on the brink of transformation. Anticipation held in balance. Jordan Blake's composed, silent command preparing the room for the inevitable shift, the subtle power of presence guiding the attention, the perception, and the unspoken acknowledgement that the next move would redefine the dynamics of the VIP lounge entirely. Claire Donovan's shoulders stiffened as she realized the subtle shift in the room was no longer under her control, the guests now leaning forward, whispering softly to one another, their eyes flicking between her and Jordan Blake, who stood composed, almost statuesque, his calm energy commanding attention. A soft click from his phone indicated that his assistant had acknowledged his signal, ready to execute the next phase. Jordan's gaze swept across the lounge, noting the minute gestures of observation, the slight nods of agreement, the cautious movements of those who had previously dismissed him, the atmosphere dense with expectation yet balanced on the silent authority he projected. Claire's hand hovered over a tablet, hesitation evident as she searched for a directive that could restore her control. But each passing second underscored the growing awareness that the quiet presence in front of her held the true power. Jordan's mind traced the series of small but deliberate steps that had brought him to this point. Experiences of patience, observation, and controlled response converging in the present moment. The soft murmurs of the guests blending with the faint rustle of papers, the gentle hum of the ventilation, and the quiet shuffle of footsteps, all creating a rhythm that accentuated the building tension. He allowed his eyes to meet several guests briefly. A nod here, a subtle glance there, reinforcing the shared understanding that authority did not always need to be loudly declared to be recognized. The polished surfaces of the lounge, the brass accents, the warm glow of lighting, all reflected back the quiet intensity, emphasizing the contrast between the poised calm of Jordan Blake and the flustered uncertainty of Claire. Each gesture she attempted was measured against the unshakable composure of the figure before her. The junior attendant keeping her phone raised, capturing the nuanced interplay. The room collectively attuned to the unfolding dynamics, the subtle shift in attention from staff to observer, from passive to engaged, the energy now palpable, vibrating through every corner of the lounge. Jordan's breathing measured, deliberate, each inhale and exhale synchronized with the rhythm of the room, his silence conveying more authority than any raised voice could. Claire's attempts to regain footing faltered further, her expression tightening, the soft gasps and whispered comments of the audience subtly aligning with the calm strength he embodied, the anticipation in the air nearly tangible, each guest sensing the quiet yet undeniable command that had taken hold. Jordan Blake remained the center, a steady force around which the energy of the lounge now orbited, his poised, silent authority shaping perception, the anticipation of what would unfold next hanging like a held note. The room collectively aware that the forthcoming revelation would reshape the dynamics entirely, leaving everyone present captivated by the subtle orchestration of power and composure. Claire Donovan's gaze flicked nervously toward the gathered guests as the room seemed to shrink under the weight of collective observation. Jordan Blake remained motionless, radiating quiet authority, his presence commanding attention without a single raised voice. The soft rustle of papers and the faint hum of conversation blending with the tapping of devices as guests discreetly captured every subtle exchange. His eyes scanning the room with deliberate patience, noting the smallest reactions. The slight lean of a head, a narrowed brow, a whispered comment, all converging into a map of awareness that stretched across the entire lounge. Claire shifted, attempting to assert control, her movements measured yet hesitant, the veneer of authority she had relied on beginning to fracture as the silent power before her became impossible to ignore. Jordan's hand moved gently toward his phone, signaling his assistant, a soft click confirming readiness. The subtle orchestration of authority unfolding without fanfare, guests leaning forward, captivated by the calm precision in his gestures, murmurs spreading softly as awareness rippled through the lounge, the velvet chairs, polished wood, and warm lighting reflecting the tension and the growing anticipation. Jordan's breathing slow, deliberate, each measured inhale reinforcing the silent command that dominated the space. A junior attendant adjusting the phone to capture the tableau, the quiet recording amplifying the shared experience among the audience. Claire's lips pressed together, hesitation flickering across her expression, every subtle motion scrutinized, her authority diminished by the collective attention aligned with Jordan's composed presence, the room itself seemingly responding to the poised tension, every glance, every subtle movement amplified by the quiet force he projected. Jordan's mind tracing the sequence of small, yet deliberate actions that led to this precise moment. Experiences of patience, restraint, and measured observation converging in real time. His calm acting like a pivot point around which the energy of the lounge shifted, whispers growing, heads turning, cameras capturing, all reinforcing the awareness that the true power rested entirely with him. Claire's attempts to regain footing faltering as the guests leaned in subtly, their attention and perception bending toward the silent authority in front of them, the polished brass accents, soft glow of lighting, and reflective surfaces emphasizing the shift in focus and tension. Jordan remaining an anchor of quiet control, the room hanging on every minimal gesture, every measured pause, the collective anticipation swelling with each passing moment, the unspoken understanding growing that the forthcoming movement, the next deliberate act, would redefine the dynamics of the lounge, leaving the audience fully captivated and the former controller of the space struggling to recalibrate under the calm yet undeniable force of his presence. And in that suspended tension, Jordan Blake stood at the center, poised, unflinching, orchestrating the next step of the transformation that would leave the room realigned around his silent command. The soft murmur of the lounge continued, a subtle current weaving through the guests as they collectively leaned forward. Jordan Blake standing at the center of attention, his calm composure a stark contrast to the nervous energy radiating from Claire Donovan, who shifted uneasily behind the counter, her attempts to assert control diminished by the quiet yet undeniable authority he exuded, each movement deliberate, measured, his eyes sweeping the room to register every reaction, every flicker of surprise or doubt, the polished wood and brass accents reflecting the tension, warm lighting accentuating the sense of anticipation as murmurs and subtle camera clicks punctuated the charged atmosphere. Jordan's hand moved slowly toward his phone, a faint tap signaling his assistant without breaking the flow of observation. The gesture barely perceptible, yet carrying a weight of authority that resonated through the space, the guests leaning in instinctively, some adjusting their devices to capture the tableau, the soft shuffle of paper and the occasional clearing of throats blending into the ambient rhythm of the lounge. Claire's expression tightened, each hesitant step she took underscoring the growing recognition of the control Jordan wielded silently. The room now collectively attuned to his presence, whispers weaving a network of awareness and anticipation, the soft hum of ventilation and the subtle creak of chairs forming a backdrop to the unfolding tension. Jordan's gaze met several of the observing guests, acknowledging their attention, reinforcing the quiet understanding that the balance of power had shifted, the polished surfaces and velvet furnishings reflecting more than just light, capturing the essence of the poised control emanating from him. Claire's hands hovered over the tablet, the hesitation apparent in her posture as she searched for a directive to regain footing. Jordan remained still, each inhale and exhale synchronized with the room's subtle rhythm, his calm acting as a pivot point around which the energy of the lounge now orbited, the guests' attention converging, subtle nods and exchanges signaling alignment with the silent authority. Claire's attempt to assert dominance faltering, her posture stiff, lips pressed, eyes darting, the space itself responding to the poised tension. Jordan Blake at the center, a quiet anchor holding the room in suspended expectation, his silent command shaping perception and focus. The collective anticipation growing as every subtle gesture, every measured pause, reinforced the understanding that the next deliberate act would redefine the lounge entirely. The room fully aware that authority need not be proclaimed loudly to be recognized. Every observer captivated, the tension stretching to a delicate apex, a moment suspended on the edge of revelation, waiting for the shift that would crystallize the dynamics and leave a lasting impression of silent, unwavering power. The atmosphere in the lounge shifted subtly as Jordan Blake's gaze met the eyes of the guests, a silent communication passing between them, a shared acknowledgement of his composed authority. Claire Donovan's attempts to mask her uncertainty faltered, each hesitant movement revealing the growing tension, the polished mahogany counters and brass accents reflecting the soft light and the intensity of the moment. Jordan's posture remained perfectly still, his presence anchoring the room, the faint hum of conversation barely audible over the quiet anticipation that radiated from him. A junior attendant adjusted her phone, capturing the subtle expressions and gestures of staff and observers alike, the soft rustle of papers and shifting chairs accentuating the charged stillness, murmurs rising and falling like a tide as guests exchanged quiet observations. Jordan's hand moved just slightly toward his phone, the faint tap signaling his assistant, readiness acknowledged, the room responding to his calm orchestration without any overt command, his eyes scanning the lounge with deliberate precision, noting each microexpression, every flicker of doubt or curiosity. Claire's lips pressed together, her posture stiffening as the growing awareness of his control settled over the room, the collective focus of the guests shifting subtly, yet unmistakably toward him, the warm lighting reflecting off polished surfaces accentuating the tension, Jordan's silent composure conveying more authority than any spoken word, the soft shuffle of feet and the quiet clicks of devices creating a rhythm that underscored the suspense, the lounge itself seeming to respond to the poised energy he projected, each subtle movement and deliberate pause reinforcing the understanding that the room was aligned with his presence, the guests leaning in, cameras poised, their anticipation palpable. Jordan's thoughts tracing the careful sequence of actions that had brought him to this point. Experiences of patience, observation, and control converging seamlessly, the quiet power he exerted commanding attention, shaping perception, and preparing the space for the inevitable revelation. Claire's gestures faltering further, the audience's focus and subtle whispers amplifying the impact of his measured authority, the soft echo of murmurs and the ambient sounds of the lounge blending with the poised silence, creating a tension that filled every corner. Jordan Blake, standing at the center, calm and unflinching, orchestrating the unfolding dynamics, each measured breath reinforcing his command, the anticipation stretching through every observer, the room suspended in a delicate balance as the subtle tension poised for the decisive action that would solidify his influence and realign the lounge around his quiet, yet undeniable authority. Jordan Blake's calm presence remained unbroken as the subtle tension in the VIP lounge reached its peak. Claire Donovan shifting uneasily behind the counter, her attempts to assert authority faltering with each passing second, the guests leaning in, some raising their phones discreetly to record, their eyes wide with a mixture of anticipation and admiration. The polished mahogany surfaces and brass accents reflecting the warm lighting and the charged atmosphere. Jordan's gaze swept across the room, noting every microexpression, every slight movement, the soft rustle of papers, and the faint shuffle of chairs adding rhythm to the charged stillness. He raised a hand slightly, signaling to his assistant with a subtle motion, the faint ping of acknowledgement confirming readiness, a quiet orchestration unfolding without a word, the energy in the room shifting incrementally, whispers passing like gentle currents, nods exchanged between guests, the quiet realization that control had shifted. Subtly yet unmistakably, Jordan's posture remained impeccable, shoulders squared, chin lifted just enough to convey calm confidence, each deliberate breath reinforcing the silent authority that dominated the space. Claire's lips parted, hesitation evident, as she sought a means to regain footing in a room now aligned with the composed presence at its center, the guests' attention collectively focused, their anticipation building. Cameras capturing the unfolding scenario from multiple angles. Soft murmurs blending with the ambient hum of the ventilation system, the polished wood and brass reflecting the nuanced dynamics. Jordan's eyes briefly met the junior attendants. A faint nod exchanged, a silent communication understood and acted upon. The room responding to his poised command, the subtle current of awareness and alignment flowing quietly through every observer. Claire's hands hovered uncertainly. The veneer of authority she had maintained unraveling as the collective perception shifted toward the calm control Jordan embodied. Every subtle gesture he made amplified by the attentive eyes and poised devices. The lounge itself seeming to respond to the deliberate tension, the murmurs growing as more guests realized the quiet command held more weight than any raised voice. The soft shuffling of feet and the rustle of papers punctuating the moment. Jordan remaining the anchor around which the energy of the space coalesced, every measured pause and deliberate breath contributing to the orchestration of anticipation, the subtle shift in attention complete as the room collectively prepared for the forthcoming revelation, the air thick with expectation, every observer aware that the next movement, executed with precision and calm, would redefine the dynamics of the lounge, leaving a lasting impression of authority, composure, and silent power. And as the anticipation stretched across every seat, every device, and every gaze, Jordan Blake stood poised, ready to convert the quiet control he had established into a transformative moment that would command respect, realign perceptions, and solidify his presence at the center of the room, the soft energy of expectation vibrating through the space like a taut string awaiting release. Jordan Blake finally raised his head higher, letting his presence fill every corner of the VIP lounge, his eyes sweeping over the guests and staff alike, noting their subtle gestures, their slight movements, the way whispers had softened into focused attention. Claire Donovan's attempts to assert control weakened with every passing second, the room now fully attuned to the quiet authority he exuded, the soft hum of the air conditioning and the rustle of papers punctuating the stillness as his fingers brushed against his phone, signaling his assistant to proceed with the next stage. A faint click confirming readiness, the energy in the room shifting, the guests leaning slightly forward, their curiosity and silent alignment growing. Jordan's posture remained impeccable, shoulders squared, back straight, each measured breath communicating calm and confidence. The polished wood and brass accents reflecting both the elegance of the space and the tension that had built to this moment. Junior attendant adjusted her phone, capturing the tableau. The subtle expressions of both staff and observers recorded, whispers now blending with nods and subtle glances between guests. The awareness spreading that authority was no longer in question. Claire's lips pressed tightly, her movements small and hesitant. The veneer of control she had relied on unraveling as the collective focus aligned with Jordan, each slight shift, each minimal gesture from him amplified by the attentive eyes. Around the lounge, the warm lighting reflecting softly off polished surfaces, emphasizing the still tension and anticipation. Jordan's mind tracing the deliberate series of actions that brought him here, patience and observation coalescing into precise execution. The silent power he wielded commanding attention and shaping perception without the need for a single spoken word. Claire's body language stiffened, the subtle tremor in her hands betraying her growing unease. The guest's attention now entirely centered on the poised figure at the center of the room. Cameras subtly capturing every microexpression, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Soft murmurs and gentle rustling blending with the ambient sounds, reinforcing the sense of imminent revelation. Jordan's calm remained absolute, each minimal movement orchestrating the room's energy, the quiet command he projected coalescing with the growing awareness of the audience. The lounge itself seeming to hold its breath, every observer aware that the unfolding moment would shift the dynamics irreversibly. The soft rhythm of shuffling papers, quiet clicks of devices, and faint footsteps forming a subtle cadence to the tension. Jordan Blake standing as the unshakable anchor in the eye of the storm, his poised authority guiding the perception of everyone present, the anticipation stretching through every chair, every corner, every attentive gaze, as the room prepared for the decisive moment where the quiet control he had maintained would transform into an unmistakable shift in power, leaving all observers captivated and aligned with the silent, yet undeniable force of his presence. Jordan Blake finally allowed himself the briefest of smiles, the kind that carried years of experience and quiet authority, his hand lifted just slightly toward his phone, signaling the final sequence of actions. The junior attendant immediately understanding, fingers poised to execute the command without drawing attention, the guests now fully aware of the subtle orchestration, their whispers turning into tentative affirmations, nods, and quiet murmurs of recognition. Claire Donovan's composure had completely fractured, the veneer of authority she had relied upon unraveling under the scrutiny of both the observing guests and the silent control he radiated, the polished surfaces of the lounge glinting softly under the warm lighting, reflecting the anticipation and tension that had been building for minutes. Jordan's gaze swept the room, taking in every microexpression, every flicker of doubt or curiosity, the gentle shuffle of papers, the soft tap of a phone, the quiet hum of ventilation, all combining into a rhythm that accentuated the poised calm he maintained. The guests leaning forward, subtly repositioning themselves to better observe the unfolding revelation, the room almost vibrating with the collective awareness that something decisive was about to occur. Jordan's posture remained impeccable, shoulders squared, chin slightly lifted, each measured breath communicating control and quiet confidence. Claire's hands hovered over her tablet, uncertain, hesitant, the soft tension in her movements betraying the recognition that the authority had shifted irrevocably. Jordan's mind traced the deliberate sequence of steps that had brought him here, every prior experience of observation, patience, and measured restraint converging seamlessly in the present moment. The subtle gestures and deliberate stillness acting as a command that no words could match, the guest's attention fully captured, some discreetly recording, others simply observing, all aligned in silent acknowledgement of the poised authority at the center of the lounge, the ambient reflections in polished wood, brass, and the soft lighting accentuating the intensity of the moment, whispers weaving through the crowd, nods and glances exchanged, the realization spreading that the room's dynamics had been quietly but completely altered. Jordan Blake standing as the unwavering anchor, the center of control, every small movement reinforcing the silent orchestration, the energy coalescing, the anticipation stretching to its peak as the next action prepared to solidify the shift in authority, the room collectively holding its breath, aware that the culmination of patience, composure, and quiet power was about to manifest, transforming not only the perception of those present, but the very balance of the space, leaving everyone captivated by the deliberate precision and silent strength that Jordan Blake embodied. The subtle tension now poised on the edge of transformation, the lounge ready to witness the definitive assertion of control and the inevitable realignment of attention and authority around the quiet yet undeniable force at its center. The lounge was utterly transformed, the once tense air now filled with a quiet awe, guests shifting in their seats, some capturing the moment on their phones, others simply watching, the polished wood and brass accents reflecting the soft glow of the lighting. Jordan Blake stood at the center, his posture unshakable, the subtle authority he had maintained now fully recognized by everyone present. Claire Donovan frozen behind the counter, her attempts to assert control rendered meaningless by the calm, deliberate power that radiated from him. Jordan's eyes scanned the room with measured precision, noting the astonishment, the respect, and the alignment of attention among the guests and staff alike. The faint ping of his phone signaled the completion of the final sequence, his assistant confirming silently, the quiet orchestration of authority now fully executed. Murmurs rising among the audience, whispered acknowledgments of his influence spreading like a gentle wave. The room collectively absorbing the reality that the silent, composed figure at the center had redirected the energy and dynamics with absolute poise. Claire's expression shifted from disbelief to reluctant acceptance, the subtle tremor in her hands visible as she realized the balance of power had irrevocably changed. Jordan's minimal gestures, each deliberate pause, and the controlled cadence of his presence had achieved in moments what words alone could never convey. The guests now leaning subtly toward observation, some nodding to one another, a shared recognition forming without a single spoken instruction. The lounge itself seeming to hold its breath, the polished surfaces reflecting the poised tension and the resonance of anticipation. Jordan's calm demeanor reinforcing the authority he wielded without needing to speak, the soft rustle of papers and the quiet shuffling of feet accentuating the rhythm of the moment. The collective awareness building that the silent command had achieved total alignment of perception. Every observer understanding that the decisive shift in control was complete. The ambient hum of the lounge blending seamlessly with the subtle gasps, whispered exclamations, and the faint clicks of devices. Each sound punctuating the success of the orchestration. Jordan Blake remained the steady center, an anchor of composure and influence. The energy of the room orbiting around his measured presence, the guests and staff fully engaged, the tension released into a sense of clarity and acknowledgement, the quiet triumph radiating through the space. A testament to the power of patience, observation, and silent authority. The lounge now transformed, the dynamic irreversibly realigned. Every gaze and gesture reinforcing the understanding that true control required no display of volume, only the unwavering presence and precision of those who command it. Jordan's slight smile conveying both satisfaction and quiet strength as the final realization settled over the room, leaving every individual present to witness the culmination of calm, deliberate power fully realized.